page 67 of your math journal. And we're going to call this one Estimating with Percents. Okay, we're going to talk about benchmark percents first. Okay, benchmark percents are common, easy to work with percents. Okay, the most common ones we're going to use would be 10%, 20%, 30%. Okay, multiples of 10. I'm sure you get that. The other ones that we commonly use would be 25%, 50%, and 75%. So the reason we do these, a lot of times in real life, we don't need the exact percentage. A close estimate is good enough, and so this helps us to think in our heads. Well, if you think about these percents, so if you're working with 10%, that's the same as 1/10. 20% would be 2/10, or 1/5. 30% would be 3/10. 40% would be 4/10, which is the same as 2/5. 50% would be 5/10, which is the same as 1/2. 60% would be 6/10, or 3/5. 70% would be 7/10. 80% would be 8/10, which is the same as 4/5. 90% would be 9/10. Okay, you know 100% complete, one whole. The other two that we tend to use would be 25%, which would be 1/4, and 75%, which is 3/4. So when we're using these, we're using them to help us get estimates, meaning close guesses. And we want, when working with these, we want to work with what would be close to what we're currently working with. Example, estimate. So we're going to use these benchmark percents to estimate some things. So estimate 47% of 692. Okay, this is where we want to round both items just to get a close idea. What benchmark percent is 47% close enough to for us? Okay, I'd estimate it to be about 50%. 47 is pretty close to 50. That's a nice one for me to work with. 50% of, now we could find 50% of this, but for the sake of estimating, let's round this to a nice 100 or 10. I'd go to 700. Okay, so remember, now what does of mean in math? Okay, this is where you're multiplying. So we're trying to find 50% of 700. So remember that 50% is the same as 1/2. So half of 700 would be about 350. So here, my estimate would be about 350. Notice the difference. This is exactly 350, but I'm estimating this. I think my answer would be close to 350. Okay, so you can see it with a bar diagram. If I were to draw a bar diagram, this would represent the whole thing. So this being 0, 700 being the entire thing. Okay, if I want this would be 0%, this would be 100%. If I wanted 50%, that'd be right in the middle. So here, notice how I've split the whole thing into halves. So this is where I would find half of 700. And that's where I can get 350. Okay, another way we can look at it is ratios. So another way to look at this, let's say we estimate %11 of $489. Okay, let's look at what we have here. What's a good benchmark percent for me to work with? Well, 10's pretty close, so I'm going to work with that. So this is just me estimating. This, something nicer to work with, would be 500. Of, remember, means times. So if I want 10% of 500, well, 10% is the same as 1/10. So I'm looking for 1/10 of 500. That means I'm going to be splitting this into 10 pieces. So 1/10 of 500. Here you could even look at multiplying fractions if you want to see it that way. So if I cross cancel here, this would be 1, and this would be 50. And that would give me 50. So a good estimate here would be about 50. Okay, let's estimate %39 of 1,211. Okay, this is pretty close to 40%, so I'm just going to turn that into 40% for my estimate. And this, something that would be easy to work with, 1,000, but I kind of want to go as close as possible, so 1,200 is pretty easy to work with. Remember, this means times of. So here, if this is about 40%, then that would mean that this would be the same as 4/10 times 1,200 over 1. Now here I can cross cancel if I can. Actually, this will reduce even more, so to make my life even easier, I'm going to reduce this to 2/5. So 2/5 times 1,200. Cross cancel, 5 will go into here. $1,200 divided by 5. Do some math over here. Some of you can do it in your head. I know some of you can't. That's why I'm showing you what you can do. 5 goes into 12 2 times. Minus 10 gives me 2. Bring down a 0. 5 goes into 20 4 times. Minus 20 leaves me with 0, but I have another 0 to work with, so I'm going to write. So 5 will go into 0 0 times. So this would be 240. Now 2 times 240 would be 480. So a good estimate would be about 480. That's all there is to do with estimating fraction or estimating percents of things.